Sponsors and Vertical Events and RIU for putting on the conference. Base metals in Cobar, that's been our mantra for about the last 8 years. Nothing's changed. We are relatively rare though, there's not too many companies in our space. So going straight into it, looking at the corporate side of things, we have 220 million shares on issue after 12 years listed life in about 3 weeks' time. No restructures along the way, so we've treasured our issued capital and kept it safe as possible. Market cap at the moment of about $85 million, cash at bank at the end of the quarter of around $4 million. Our other major asset is 36% of Saturn Metals, which is Ian Bamber is presenting here, I think, later today. And Saturn has an exposure to the Apollo Hill gold project. So it's our hedge on gold. Very interesting story, very close to Genesis Minerals, so recommend you drop in to hear that story. In terms of our shareholder base, we've got a pretty interesting shareholder share register. St Barbara Limited, 17.9%. Hampton Hill Mining, just under 16%, or 17% I should say. Directors skin in the game, and a high net worth individual, just under 10% Ariki Investments. So we're tightly held. Our share price has risen and fallen over the last 18 months or so off the back of both discovery and I guess commodity price fluctuations, but we've mostly been on the up. A small board. So Cobar's where we're focused. It's celebrating 150 years of high-grade mining this year. It's got the most metal endowment in New South Wales outside of Broken Hill in terms of base metal endowment, but it's very rich polymetallic, which speaks to the style of ore bodies that you tend to come across. So the copper segment there in that pie chart has mostly come from the CSA mine, which is owned by Glencore, just to the north of Cobar itself. The zinc, lead and silver, a lot of that's come from the Endeavour mine, which is owned by our joint venture partner, CBH Resources, and a lot of the gold, or most of the gold, has come out of the Peak mines. So it's certainly a place to be looking. It's got a history of high-grade mining. We dominate the exploration landscape. We've got around 4,000 square kilometres of tenure. It's split into a number of packages. The brown-coloured tenure is 100% owned by Peel. The pale green is in joint venture with the Japanese government entity JOGMEC, and the red tenure is in joint venture with CBH Resources, who own the Endeavour mine and mill to the north of Cobar there. The blue tenement is a joint venture with Talisman that we farmed out to them a couple of years ago. So we dominate the landscape in terms of exploration. The prize that we're searching for, this is a long section through the Peak mines, line of lode, which is owned by Aurelia Metals, one of our neighbours. And essentially, I guess the key takeaway is that what you find near surface is usually the tip of the iceberg. They're very long in the vertical plane, deep plumbing. The CSA mine has mineralisation to over 2.2 kilometres below surface. The Peak itself at the Perseverance lode is around 1,500 metres below surface. So they deliver, I guess they reveal themselves over sustained exploration over decades, really. But the other key thing is they're very high grade. So our focus over this period is really a transformational period. We're moving from, I guess, pure exploration towards mine development, and in that sense we're looking at two of our projects. So Wagga Tank Southern Nights, which we own 100% of. This was essentially a forgotten deposit that we picked up in 2016 and have rapidly advanced and had some stunning drill intercepts returned from recently. We've just completed a 25,000 metre resource definition drill out, and we're targeting a maiden resource for June, and then the project will go into scoping study. Malleebull's our other key asset in the district. So it's a copper dominant project. It's in joint venture with CBH Resources, and we're at a development decision more or less now. We've got plenty of upside in terms of regional exposure. lots of great targets to get out to. So looking at Wagga Tank Southern Nights, so we own 100% of this, and we picked it up for a song really from MMG and their joint venture partner. We paid a royalty, and we've since repurchased that royalty. A third-party offer was made on it by a royalty streaming group, so we repurchased that late last year for $3 million. Very underexplored. When we first turned up, just Wagga Tank was known about, which covered about 300 metres of strike length, and no drilling had occurred there since 1989. In the last couple of years, we've mapped out a 2 kilometre long mineralised structure, so it's a camp scale mineral environment, and we certainly believe there's some major structures and plenty of upside over the longer term in terms of exploration. When we looked at the data that we got off MMG, we couldn't really understand why no one had looked at this project for such a long time. So discovered in 1976, and the last round of drilling in 1989 by Cyprus, where Cyprus essentially said, at this point it's too small for us, but needs follow-up drilling because it's open in all directions. So we looked at the data, 42 historic drill holes, 24 with economic drill hits. There's an oxide gold zone sitting very close to surface. There's indications of some supergene enrichment, but certainly the thing that interested us the most was a primary massive sulphide zinc lead silver rich mineralisation. So we picked it up, and the data set was a bit ordinary, so we essentially had to start from scratch again. There were no collars left at surface, so we rectified the data and set about essentially confirming the historic data, and our results more or less mirrored the historic results. So we got some broad high-grade intercepts of primary zinc lead silver rich mineralisation. We also saw some interesting gold and copper numbers becoming evident in the system as well. And at the end of our drilling in sort of 2017, we came to the conclusion that the system was likely to be much larger than had previously been considered. So we completed quite a lot of geophysics, so we airborne mag and EM, surface EM, IP, gravity, and a combination of mag and IP essentially gave us a number of targets that suggested the requirement for follow-up. And one of those targets, we stepped out a kilometre to the south along strike. There's a 2.5 kilometre long chargeable anomaly associated with the structure hosting Wagga Tank, and we discovered Southern Nights in October 2017. We had some very high-grade intercepts very early and good widths as well. Essentially, between October 2017 and June last year, we mapped out a 700-metre long corridor of strong mineralisation at the Southern Nights prospect area. It's still open. It's open in all directions, essentially. The zone between Southern Nights and Wagga Tank, we've seen some incredibly strong alteration. The mineralisation waxes and wanes a little bit. But in that corridor, we've had a massive sulphide hit at depth. So that intercept down the bottom there, 15 metres of 2.5% copper and 2.7 gold with good silver and some zinc in the equation as well. There's a conductor plate associated with that, so we believe we've got a target there that will shape up as a body of mineralisation over the longer term. Late last year, we finalised a capital raising essentially for a resource drill out, and we hit spectacular mineralisation in one of our earliest drill holes as part of the resource infill program. 18 metres at 40% zinc and 16% lead, and very good silver and gold credits as well at a relatively shallow depth, 180 metres down hole, so about 150 below surface. I guess since then we've mapped out a high-grade core of mineralisation. It's starting about 120 metres below surface, and we're still seeing it at around 400 metres below surface with a strike of around 150 to 200 metres. The width varies from a metre or two up to 20 to 30 metres in true width. So the obvious economic potential here has been driving our drilling program. We've just finished the resource drill out. That's what that core looks like. 69.9% combined lead zinc in that top metre, so 183 to 184, right up against the theoretical limit of what you can put into rock. The strike, the long section illustration, just showing where Wagga Tank sits, obviously, and the high-grade core of Southern Nights that we've been mapping out lately, but sitting within the overall 700 metres of strike. And that massive sulphide hit that's copper-gold rich, 14.5 metres, sits in here. And there's about 100 by 100 metre conductor plate associated with that. So you could see how this could turn into that long section, a similar long section to Peak, albeit this is 2 kilometres versus about 8 kilometres of strike at the Peak. The forward program, resource definition drilling is now completed. Assay results will flow into the balance of this month. Maiden mineral resource estimate by the end of June, and then we'll jump straight into scoping after that. We've already done some options studies, and so we've been looking at both dig and truck and standalone plant, and we've started all the pre-development studies as well, including in-depth metallurgical test work. The longer-term potential is excellent in terms of exploration upside. We've got another prospect 4 kilometres to the east that's returned these results here. So essentially more of the same of the Wagga Tank Southern Nights style of mineralisation. We've also got a magnetic feature that essentially sits in this ring-like structure that we think exists, and it's sitting about 800 metres below surface. We think it's the engine for the mineralising event, so essentially some sort of intrusive or porphyry. Moving on to Mallee Bull. This is the most advanced of our prospects, so it's a joint venture with CBH Resources. It's one of the highest grade undeveloped copper resources in Australia. It sits on 100% owned ground by Peel. We bought the Western Lands lease a few years back. We're essentially looking at a small scale dig and truck operation to get things up and running here. It's a copper rich deposit, as I mentioned, but there is some high grade zinc lead silver near surface, so within about 60 metres of surface we do have some massive sulphides of a similar tenor to what we see at Southern Nights. It's certainly more limited, but it's very high grade. So with that in mind, essentially we're looking at a concept of putting in a box cut up around here and then essentially winding a decline down a few hundred metres below surface. We'll take out a bulk sample from the silver ray lens, which is the zinc lead silver rich mineralisation that'll help repay some of the costs associated. And in the process we'll complete some exploration drilling from underground and some development drives into this sort of mineralisation that exists in the top 300 metres. And then we hope to be able to push a button on a full-scale mining operation. So stage 2 is really about getting to the deeper levels where around 400 to 700 metres below surface we've hit some very broad, high-grade, copper-rich mineralisation. So look, we're at a decision point with our joint venture partner, hoping we can put out some news about that not too far away. Last but not least is the Jogmec joint venture, where we've made a major copper find as well. It reminds me of Mallee Bull, except about 4 years earlier in a timing sense. We've got some beautiful high-grade chalcopyrite-rich mineralisation, certainly classic Cobar style or CSA style, very high tenor. It starts close to surface and we've mapped it out to about 600 metres below surface. We don't have a great control on the structures, the mineralising structures, so we're hoping to do some more drilling there this year on a slightly different orientation to increase our knowledge. But hopefully if that pans out, we can move this into a resource drilling mode in the next year or two. We also have a high-grade, a very strong conductor at another prospect called Baduba, and we're planning to drill that very soon as well. So just in summary, look, an efficient, targeted company, money into the ground. That's Bob Vassey's quote when he was justifying the rationale for investing in Peel. We certainly are in the top 10% when it comes to putting money into the ground versus corporate and admin spend. We do a lot of drilling, obviously, as a result, and we're making discoveries, and the area we're in, we're dominating, and the discoveries we make are very high grade. So thank you for your time today. Thanks, Jerry.